Jung's greatest discovery was also his most dangerous. The human psyche operates on hidden programs that completely control your life while letting you believe you're in charge. You think you're making choices, but Jung discovered you're following scripts. Think you know yourself, but Jung proved you only know the character you're playing. This isn't philosophy or theory. Jung documented this through decades of clinical observation, watching thousands of people live out patterns they couldn't see, driven by forces they didn't know existed, destroying their lives while believing they were improving them. The comfortable lie is that you're a rational being making conscious decisions based on logic and free will. The uncomfortable truth Jung discovered: you're about 10% conscious actor and 90% unconscious programming, and that programming runs on ancient software that has nothing to do with your modern life. But here's what makes this truly disturbing. The unconscious isn't just hidden, it actively hides itself. It makes you believe your program responses are personal choices, makes you think your inherited patterns are individual preferences, makes you defend the very prison bars that keep you caged. Jung spent his life trying to wake people up to this reality. Most couldn't handle it. Can you? Let me show you what's actually running your life. The first truth Jung discovered will disturb anyone who believes they're self-made. You're not living your own life. You're completing your parents' unfinished business, not consciously, not deliberately, but with absolute precision. You're living out the dreams they abandoned, healing the wounds they couldn't face, and repeating the patterns they never resolved. Jung called this the unlived life of the parent, the most powerful unconscious force shaping your existence. Think about your major life choices: career, relationships, lifestyle. You think you chose them? Jung discovered that children unconsciously absorb their parents' repressed desires and unlived potential, then spend their lives fulfilling them without knowing it. The father who wanted to be an artist but became an accountant, his child becomes obsessed with creative expression. The mother who sacrificed adventure for security, her child can't stop taking risks. But it goes deeper. You're not just living their unlived dreams, you're also living their nightmares. Every fear they couldn't face, you're confronting. Every pattern they couldn't break, you're repeating. Every shadow they denied, you're embodying. Jung observed this pattern with disturbing consistency. A woman terrified of abandonment discovers her mother lost a child before she was born, a loss never discussed, never grieved, but somehow transmitted psychologically to the daughter who lives out that abandonment fear. A man compulsively avoiding success traces it back to his father's unconscious fear of surpassing his own father. Here's what's actually happening. The psyche abhors incompletion. What one generation doesn't resolve, the next generation inherits as psychological debt. You're paying interest on emotional loans you never took out, fulfilling contracts you never signed, completing stories that started before you were born. Jung documented case after case where people's entire life problems dissolved once they recognized they were living parental patterns. A businessman failing repeatedly despite brilliance discovers he's unconsciously fulfilling his father's hidden belief that their family doesn't deserve success. A woman unable to maintain relationships realizes she's living her mother's unconscious rage at men, expressed through her daughter's romantic sabotage. The mechanism works through what Jung called participation mystique, a psychological merger where boundaries between parent and child dissolve at unconscious levels. The child doesn't just observe the parent's life, they absorb it completely, including all the repressed, denied, and unlived aspects. These become unconscious commands the child spends their life obeying. Consider your own patterns. That career you chose. Does it complete something your parents started? That relationship dynamic you keep recreating? Does it mirror or oppose your parents' marriage? That fear that controls you? Did it protect one of your parents from something they couldn't face? The test is simple but disturbing. Look at your biggest struggles, your repetitive patterns, your unexplainable compulsions. Then look at your parents' unlived lives, unspoken dreams, and unprocessed traumas. The correlation will shock you. You're not struggling with your issues. You're struggling with inherited issues wearing your face. But here's the truly disturbing part. Even recognizing these patterns doesn't immediately free you. The programming runs deeper than consciousness can easily reach. You can know intellectually that you're living your mother's fears or your father's dreams, yet still feel powerlessly compelled to continue. Jung discovered that this inherited psychological material operates like ancestral memory, patterns passed down not through genetics, but through the psychological field families create. You're not just influenced by what your parents did, you're shaped by what they didn't do, couldn't face, and never resolved. This parental programming connects directly to the next uncomfortable truth about what else is controlling your life from the shadows. Jung's second discovery is even more unsettling. Everything you hate in others is actually yourself. The parts you've rejected so completely that you can only see them in other people. This isn't metaphorical. Jung discovered that the psyche literally projects its own rejected aspects onto others, then experiences genuine rage, disgust, or hatred toward these projections. You're not seeing them. You're seeing your own shadow wearing their face. The shadow contains everything you learned was unacceptable about yourself. Every trait that got you punished, rejected, or abandoned got pushed into the shadow. But here's what nobody tells you. The shadow doesn't disappear. It grows stronger in darkness, and it controls your life from the unconscious. Think about someone who triggers intense reaction in you, not mild annoyance, but visceral response. That intensity? That's your shadow recognizing itself. The arrogant person who infuriates you, you carry disowned arrogance. The weak person who disgusts you, you've rejected your own vulnerability. The selfish person who enrages you, you've denied your own self-interest so completely it can only appear in others. Jung discovered something even more disturbing. We unconsciously attract people who embody our shadow. That toxic relationship you can't leave, you're magnetically drawn to them because they carry your rejected parts. That boss who makes your life hell, you unconsciously chose that job because they mirror your disowned aspects. You're surrounding yourself with your own shadow, then wondering why life feels like hell. The shadow forms in childhood through a process Jung called selective introjection. You learn which parts of yourself get love and which get rejection. The loved parts become ego. The rejected parts become shadow. By age 7, you've split yourself in half. One half visible and accepted, the other half hidden and denied. But the shadow doesn't just contain negative traits. Jung discovered the golden shadow, positive qualities you've disowned because they were too threatening to others. Your power, brilliance, creativity, sexuality, anything that made others uncomfortable got shadowed. You're not just projecting your darkness onto others, you're projecting your light too, seeing in others the greatness you won't claim in yourself. One man came to Jung complaining about dishonest people everywhere, business partners who betrayed him, friends who lied, romantic partners who cheated. Jung helped him discover his own capacity for deception, so deeply rejected he couldn't see it in himself, only in everyone around him. Once he owned his shadow of dishonesty, dishonest people stopped appearing in his life. Not because they changed, because he stopped unconsciously attracting them. The shadow operates through what Jung called unconscious compensation. Whatever you consciously claim to be, the shadow becomes its opposite. The person who prides themselves on kindness develops a cruel shadow. The one who identifies as strong develops a weak shadow. The more extreme your conscious position, the more extreme your unconscious shadow. But here's the trap. The ego would rather die than admit the shadow exists. It will create elaborate justifications for why your hatred of others is justified, why your projections are actually perceptions, why everyone else needs to change. The very mechanism that creates the shadow also prevents you from seeing it. Jung observed that people spend extraordinary energy maintaining their shadows. Every judgment requires energy to sustain. Every projection needs constant reinforcement. Every rejection of self demands vigilance. You're exhausting yourself, maintaining an image that isn't even real, while your shadow grows more powerful from neglect. The shadow explains why your life doesn't change despite your efforts. You're trying to change conscious behaviors while unconscious shadow patterns run the show. It's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic while ignoring the iceberg. And speaking of unconscious creation, this leads directly to the next terrifying truth about what you're manifesting without knowing it. If you're feeling uncomfortable, defensive, or angry right now, good. That's your unconscious recognizing it's been seen. The very discomfort you're experiencing is proof these truths are hitting their target. Before we dive into the final revelations that might completely shatter your self-concept, check out our new guide, True Self-Discovery, with 24 practical reflection exercises designed to help you find your way within. Click below to get True Self-Discovery. Jung's third discovery sounds impossible until you see it operating in your life. You unconsciously create exactly what you're trying to avoid. The person terrified of abandonment unconsciously drives people away. The one desperate for success unconsciously sabotages every opportunity. The one seeking love unconsciously chooses people incapable of providing it. Jung called this unconscious arrangement, the psyche's disturbing tendency to manifest what it fears most. This isn't karma or law of attraction. It's psychological mechanics. When you fear something intensely, your unconscious becomes obsessed with it. And what the unconscious obsesses over, it creates, not deliberately, mechanically, automatically, with the precision of a computer program. Jung documented this pattern relentlessly. A woman terrified of poverty unconsciously makes financial decisions guaranteeing struggle. A man fearing betrayal unconsciously chooses partners primed to betray. A person dreading illness unconsciously maintains habits ensuring sickness. They consciously try to avoid these outcomes while unconsciously ensuring them. Here's the mechanism. Fear creates hyperfocus. Hyperfocus creates unconscious identification. Identification creates manifestation. You become what you resist because resistance is just another form of attachment. The psyche doesn't distinguish between wanting and not wanting. It only recognizes intensity of focus. Jung discovered this through studying what he called fate neurosis, people who seemed destined to repeat specific tragedies. But it wasn't fate, it was unconscious precision. They were so identified with their feared outcome that they unconsciously orchestrated it repeatedly, each time believing it was happening to them rather than through them. One businessman came to Jung confused why every venture failed despite careful planning. Through analysis, Jung uncovered the man's deepest fear, becoming like his failure father. But here's the twist. His father wasn't actually a failure. The son had created this narrative to feel superior. His unconscious, knowing the truth, kept creating failures to match the false story he needed to maintain. This mechanism explains repetitive patterns. That relationship dynamic you swore you'd never repeat, but keep recreating. That financial situation you desperately try to avoid, but repeatedly manifest. That health issue you fear that keeps appearing. You're not unlucky. You're unconsciously precise in creating what you focus on. Jung discovered something even more disturbing. We're often more committed to our fears than our desires. The fear of abandonment is more real to someone than the desire for connection. The fear of failure more powerful than the wish for success. We know our fears intimately, believe in them completely, and unconsciously fulfill them with religious devotion. The unconscious creation of fears operates through subtle behavioral adjustments you don't consciously notice. Fearing rejection, you become slightly distant, ensuring rejection. Fearing poverty, you make subtly poor financial choices. Fearing illness, you unconsciously stress your system. These micro-behaviors, invisible to consciousness, accumulate into the feared outcome. Jung observed that people often feel relief when their fears manifest, not consciously, but unconsciously. The anticipation ends. The waiting is over. The feared thing has finally happened, and the unconscious can relax its vigilance temporarily before starting the cycle again. The truly disturbing part, even knowing this doesn't immediately stop it. You can recognize you're creating your fears, yet feel powerless to stop. The unconscious programs run deeper than intellectual understanding can reach. Which brings us to the next shattering truth about the false self you're maintaining at tremendous cost. Jung's fourth discovery explains why successful people are often the most miserable. The persona you've perfected is suffocating your authentic self. The persona, the mask you wear, the role you play, the image you maintain, isn't just false identity. Jung discovered it's an active psychological parasite, feeding on your life force while giving you the illusion of existence. The more perfect your persona, the more dead you feel inside. You started building your persona in childhood, learning which parts of yourself got approval and which got rejection. Layer by layer, year by year, you constructed this false self so perfectly that you forgot it was construction. Now you maintain it automatically, unconsciously, at devastating psychological cost. Think about the energy required to maintain your image. Every interaction filtered through, how will this look? Every decision evaluated by, what will people think? Every authentic impulse suppressed because it doesn't fit your persona. You're burning massive psychological resources maintaining something that isn't even real. Jung observed that the most successful personas create the deepest suffering. The perfect mother who feels empty inside. The successful businessman dead behind the eyes. The spiritual teacher living in private hell. They've become so identified with their persona that their real self is dying from neglect. The persona isn't just a mask, it's a prison guard. It monitors every thought for acceptability, censors every emotion for appropriateness, edits every expression for approval. You're living under psychological totalitarianism, and the dictator is your own false self. Jung discovered the persona operates through what he called psychological inflation. You don't just play a role, you become possessed by it. The role takes over, living through you while you disappear. You become an empty costume walking around, perfectly performing a life that isn't yours. Here's what's actually happening. Every time you choose persona over authenticity, a part of you dies, not metaphorically, psychologically. The authentic self atrophies from disuse. The real you weakens from constant suppression. Eventually, you become hollow, a walking persona with no one inside. One executive came to Jung with everything, wealth, respect, family, but felt like he was living in a beautiful prison. Through analysis, Jung showed him his entire life was persona performance. Every relationship, every achievement, every moment was filtered through his false self. He'd become so good at being who others needed that he'd forgotten who he was. But here's the trap. Society rewards persona and punishes authenticity. The better you perform your role, the more approval you get. The more authentic you become, the more threatening you are to others' personas. So we choose slow soul death over social rejection. This connects to the final, most disturbing truth Jung discovered about the prison you're unknowingly maintaining. Jung's final discovery is the most hopeless or hopeful, depending on your readiness. You will unconsciously repeat every pattern, live every inherited program, and recreate every fear until you become conscious of what's running you. This isn't punishment, it's the psyche's method of forcing consciousness. Jung called it the repetition compulsion. The unconscious will replay the same dynamics endlessly, in different costumes, with different people, until you finally see the pattern and break free. That series of similar relationships, same pattern, different faces, those recurring life situations, same lesson, different classroom, those repetitive struggles, same unconscious program running on loop. The psyche will keep presenting the same test until you pass it. Jung discovered that life isn't random, it's precisely orchestrated by your unconscious to force growth. Every person you meet, every situation you encounter, every challenge you face is perfectly designed to make you conscious of what's unconscious. The universe isn't doing this to you. Your own psyche is doing it for you. But here's the disturbing part. Most people never wake up. They repeat the same patterns for decades, blame external circumstances, and die without recognizing they were unconsciously creating everything. They live the same year 75 times and call it a life. Jung documented people in their 70s still living out childhood patterns, still projecting shadows, still maintaining personas, still creating fears, completely unconscious that they're running programs installed before they could speak. Entire lives lived on autopilot, never once experiencing authentic existence. The repetition intensifies over time. Jung observed that ignored patterns don't fade, they amplify. The whisper becomes a shout. The tap becomes a sledgehammer. The psyche increases pressure until you either wake up or break down. And sometimes breakdown is the only way to break through. Each repetition offers an opportunity for consciousness. That moment when you think, why does this keep happening to me? That's the psyche inviting awakening. But most people ask the question, then immediately blame others, circumstances, luck, anything but their own unconscious patterns. The repetition only stops when you see it, not intellectually, viscerally, When you catch yourself mid-pattern and realize, I'm doing it again. When you see your projection as it happens. When you feel the persona constructing itself. When you recognize the inherited pattern activating. That moment of recognition is the beginning of freedom. But, and this is crucial, seeing the pattern doesn't immediately end it. Jung discovered that becoming conscious is a gradual process. You'll see the pattern, yet repeat it. Recognize the projection, yet make it. Know the persona is false, yet maintain it. Consciousness dawns slowly, and the unconscious fights to maintain control. Jung called this the struggle between consciousness and unconsciousness, a battle for control of your life. The unconscious had been running things for decades. It won't surrender power easily. Every step toward consciousness is met with unconscious resistance. Every awakening triggers a counterattack from the sleeping part that wants to stay asleep. Jung's complete picture is devastating. You're living your parents' unlived lives while thinking they're your choices, projecting your shadow onto others while believing you're seeing clearly, creating your fears while trying to avoid them, maintaining a persona that's killing your soul, repeating unconscious patterns that will continue until you wake up. This isn't a comfortable truth. It's a devastating revelation that most people can't handle. The ego would rather maintain illusions than face the reality of its own automation, would rather blame others than own projections, would rather repeat suffering than become conscious. If you've made it this far, you're either ready for change or masochistic. Either way, the door is now open. You can't unknow what you now know. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't return to the comfortable ignorance that made unconscious life bearable. The question now is what you'll do with this knowledge. Will you use it to begin the difficult work of becoming conscious? Or will you let it fade, returning to your patterns, your projections, your persona, pretending you never saw what you just saw? I warned you not to click this video unless you were ready. Now you understand why. Once you see the unconscious patterns running your life, you can't return to comfortable ignorance. Once you recognize the projections, personas, and inherited patterns, you become responsible for them. Jung's revelation isn't meant to depress you, it's meant to free you. But freedom requires seeing the prison first. Liberation demands recognizing what binds you. Consciousness only dawns when you admit you've been unconscious. The question now isn't whether these patterns are running your life, they are. The question is whether you'll remain unconsciously controlled or become conscious enough to choose differently. Whether you'll keep projecting shadows or integrate them. Whether you'll maintain the persona or risk authenticity. Whether you'll repeat patterns or break them. Most people close videos like this and return to sleep. The unconscious is comfortable with being exposed. It knows most people lack the courage to change. Will you be different? Or will you go back to your patterns, your projections, your persona, pretending you didn't see what you just saw? The choice is yours. But remember, now that you know, you can't unknow. Now that you've seen, you can't unsee. The only question is whether you'll act on what you've discovered or spend the rest of your life pretending you haven't discovered it. If you're ready to start the real work of becoming conscious, subscribe to this channel where we explore Jung's most challenging truths without sugarcoating. To dive even deeper into Jung's revolutionary psychology and what it means for your spiritual awakening, click the recommended video on your screen now.